There is a jar sitting on a shelf somewhere in an Amish farmhouse right now. No electricity, no refrigerator, no expiration date. And inside that jar is the reason that family will never run out of bread. Not this winter, not next year, not ever. Most people think bread is one of the most fragile foods you can make. You bake it, you eat it in 3 days, and if you forget it on the counter for a week, you throw it away. That is what we were taught. That is what the modern kitchen assumes. But the Amish never believed that. For generations, women in these communities kept something alive in a small glass jar on a wooden shelf. They fed it, protected it, passed it down to their daughters on their wedding day. That single jar gave their family the power to make fresh bread anytime for the rest of their lives without buying a single thing from a store. What they preserved was not the bread. It was the ability to make bread forever. Today, I am going to show you exactly what was inside that jar. I will show you how the system worked, why it disappeared from most American kitchens, and I will show you how you can bring it back starting today with things you already have at home. Let's start with something that might surprise you. When people hear Amish bread in a jar, they picture a loaf of baked bread sealed inside a mason jar, sitting on a pantry shelf for 12 months. And honestly, that image is everywhere online. But that is not what the Amish actually did. Understanding the difference between that myth and the real method, that is where everything changes. Because what those women kept in the jar was not bread. It was something far more valuable than bread. It was a living culture, a fermented starter made from nothing but flour, water, and wild yeast pulled from the air itself. A culture so alive that, if you feed it regularly, it never dies. Some Amish families have starters that are older than anyone alive in their household, 50 years old, 80 years old. There are documented cases of starters passed down for over a century. They were carried from one farmhouse to the next, wrapped in cloth, stored in a ceramic crock, handed to a daughter on her wedding morning the same way another family might hand down a ring or a quilt. Think about what that means for a moment. A jar that produces bread, not once, not for a season, forever. This starter, what the Amish called the friendship bread culture, works because wild fermentation is one of the most stable biological systems on the planet. The microorganisms inside that jar create their own acidic environment that fights off harmful bacteria. They regulate themselves. They survive temperature swings that would destroy commercial yeast. And when you feed them just a little flour, a little water on a regular schedule, they reward you with the most flavorful, most digestible, most nourishing bread you have ever tasted. Here is what nobody tells you about commercial bread yeast. It was invented less than 200 years ago. Before that, every culture on Earth, Egyptian, Roman, medieval European, early American, made bread exactly this way, with a living starter, with wild fermentation, with a jar on a shelf, and knowledge passed from one pair of hands to the next. The Amish never stopped. While the rest of the country handed that knowledge over to a factory, they kept the jar. They kept feeding it, and they kept making bread that did not need a grocery store, a power grid, or an expiration date printed on a plastic bag. Now here is the question you are probably asking yourself: how do I start one? How do I actually build this living culture from scratch? And what do I do with it once I have it? I am going to walk you through the whole thing right now. And I want you to see just how simple this is. This is knowledge your great-grandmother would have considered completely ordinary. To make your Amish starter from scratch, you need 3 things: flour, milk, and sugar. That is the traditional Amish version. Slightly sweeter than a San Francisco sourdough, with a gentler tang and a softer crumb. Some families used water instead of milk. Some skipped the sugar entirely. But the classic Amish friendship bread starter uses all 3. The result is a bread that tastes like something between a rustic country loaf and a very lightly sweet dinner roll. Warm, dense, deeply satisfying. Day 1. You combine equal parts flour, milk, and sugar in a clean glass jar. No metal bowls. The acid in the fermentation reacts with metal and gives the bread a strange taste. Glass or ceramic only. You stir it well. You cover the jar loosely. Not sealed, never sealed at this stage, because the culture needs to breathe. And you leave it at room temperature. Then you wait. Over the next 10 days, you feed that jar. Every few days, you add more flour, more milk, more sugar. You stir it. You watch it. And something remarkable starts to happen. The mixture begins to bubble. It begins to rise. It begins to smell. First slightly sweet, then yeasty, then complex and sour and alive. That smell is genuinely hard to describe if you have never experienced it. That smell is thousands of years of human history. That smell is what every kitchen in the ancient world knew. By day 10, your starter is ready. And here is where the Amish tradition becomes truly beautiful. You do not use all of it. You divide it. You keep one portion for yourself. This becomes your permanent culture, your jar on the shelf. This becomes your family's insurance policy against ever being without bread. And the rest? You give away. To a neighbor, to a daughter, to a friend who has never made bread in her life, but is about to learn. The starter multiplies precisely so it can be shared. That is not an accident. That is the design of the whole system. The Amish called it friendship bread for a reason. The jar was never meant to stay in one kitchen. Now, once your starter is established, the bread itself is straightforward. You take 1 cup of your active starter and combine it with flour, eggs, oil, baking powder. Add whatever additions you love, cinnamon and sugar for a sweeter loaf, herbs and olive oil for something more savory, dried fruit and nuts for something closer to a harvest bread. The batter goes into your baking vessel of choice. And here is where we need to talk about the jar method honestly, because there is a version of this story online that skips a very important detail, and I am not going to do that to you. Baking bread batter inside a sealed glass jar and leaving it unrefrigerated for months is not safe by modern food science standards. The science is clear on this. Bread is a low-acid food. A sealed, airless jar creates exactly the conditions that harmful bacteria need to grow. Universities have studied this. The Amish themselves did not actually store baked bread in sealed jars long-term. What they stored was the dry system, or the live starter, not the finished baked loaf. So what is the real Amish preservation method for the bread itself? There are 3, and each one is genuinely fascinating. The first is the dry mix jar. You combine all your dry ingredients, flour, sugar, baking powder, spices, salt, inside a mason jar with an oxygen absorber. Seal it and store it on your pantry shelf for up to a year. The jar holds the complete recipe, minus the wet ingredients. When you want bread, you open the jar, add your eggs and oil, mix, bake. 15 minutes of work from pantry to oven. This is the method food safety specialists actually recommend as the real alternative. And it works beautifully. The second is deep drying. Amish women baked their bread fully, then sliced it thin and dried it until it had almost no moisture left. Essentially a thick cracker or hardtack, stored in a cool, dry place inside a cloth bag or wooden box. This bread lasts for months and can be rehydrated in soup, stew, or warm water. It is not the same as fresh bread, but it is nutritious, filling, and requires nothing but an oven and patience. The third, and this is the one that requires the most respect, is the live starter system itself. Because if you maintain your starter, you never need to preserve bread at all. You always have the capacity to make a fresh loaf within 24 hours. The jar is not storing food. The jar is storing the engine that makes food, permanently. That shift in thinking, from preserving the product to preserving the process, is the deepest lesson the Amish have to teach us. If you want to go deeper into the full ancestral preservation system, not just the bread, but the complete method these communities used to keep a pantry stocked through any winter, through any crisis, any year, we have put together everything in one place over at ancestralbeauty.shop. It is the kind of resource these women would have written down if anyone had thought to ask them. Consider this video the beginning of that conversation. But the bread and the starter, as powerful as they are are only part of what made the Amish kitchen truly self-sufficient, because bread needs to be eaten with something. And the way these communities preserved everything else, their vegetables, their meats, their dairy, that system is just as extraordinary and just as forgotten. Now I want to talk about something that might make you a little uncomfortable, because I think you deserve to hear it. In less than 2 generations, the average American family went from preserving their own food, maintaining their own starters, growing their own ingredients, and feeding themselves through every season, to being completely, totally dependent on a supply chain they have no control over whatsoever. A power outage, a storm, a disruption in trucking, and the grocery store shelves are empty in 72 hours. That did not happen because we chose convenience over tradition. It happened because convenience was sold to us as an upgrade, as progress, as freedom, but the Amish never bought it. And if you look at their pantries, rows of sealed jars, starter cultures decades old, root cellars full of what they grew themselves, you start to wonder who actually has more freedom: the family that needs a functioning power grid to eat breakfast, or the family with a jar on a wooden shelf that has been feeding people since before anyone in the house was born. The knowledge did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because someone figured out how to sell us a replacement. And that is exactly why videos like this one exist, because the women who carried this knowledge, in their hands, in their kitchens, in jars passed from mother to daughter on wedding mornings, they deserve to be remembered. And what they knew deserves to come back. The Amish pantry philosophy has a name, even if they never called it that. They called it simply putting food by. The idea is that your kitchen's primary job, before anything else, is to make sure the family eats through every season without needing to go anywhere. Summer is not just summer. Summer is the work you do so that winter is not a crisis. This is the full pantry philosophy, and it governs every decision an Amish household makes about food. You grow more than you need. You preserve more than you think you will use. You maintain your starter, your cultures, your dry mixes, your root cellar stocks, not because you expect disaster, but because self-sufficiency is not a backup plan. It is the primary plan. And here is what strikes me every time I think about this. The Amish are not doing this out of poverty or necessity. Many of these communities are economically comfortable. They choose this way of living because they understand something about dependence that most of us have stopped thinking about entirely. When your food comes from a jar you made yourself, you are not just eating. You are practicing a skill. You are maintaining knowledge. You are staying connected to a chain of human wisdom that goes back 6,000 years. To the first Egyptian baker who mixed flour and water and left it in the sun, and came back to find something alive and bubbling and extraordinary. The jar on the Amish shelf is not old-fashioned. It is the smartest kitchen tool that ever existed. Because unlike a refrigerator, it does not need electricity. Unlike a grocery store, it does not need a supply chain. Unlike a packet of commercial yeast, it does not have an expiration date. It just needs you to feed it, and it will feed you back for the rest of your life and beyond. So let's bring this full circle. What the Amish kept in that jar was never just bread. It was a living system, a culture built over decades, fed by hand, passed from mother to daughter, designed to make a family independent. Independent from anything they could not grow or make themselves. The starter is the engine. The dry mix jar is the backup. The full pantry philosophy is the mindset that holds it all together. You came into this video thinking bread spoils in 3 days. You are leaving it knowing that the right knowledge, tended carefully, passed on generously, never spoils at all. If this opened something up for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to keep going deeper into the ancestral wisdom these communities carried, the full system, not just the bread, you know where to find us. This knowledge was almost lost. Let's make sure it isn't.